Did you know that there are legal and financial alternatives to getting a divorce in California? Today, we're going to be talking about couples mediation, separation agreements, post-nuptial agreements, legal separation, and dissolution of marriage. I'm Laurie Itkin. I'm a CDFA, which stands for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. I practice throughout California. And today I'm joined by one of the top mediators in San Diego, Julie Mack. You can find her at juliemackmediation.com. If you Google Julie Mack and you get a singer, that's not your gal. Anyway, Julie, I'm so happy to invite you here today because so many mediators in town, they'll do legal separation, they'll do divorce, but there are so many other options that you provide your clients. Let's start with a separation agreement. Can you tell us what's involved in that and who that's appropriate for?
Definitely. One of the things that I realized over doing family law for the last 27 years is that people do not come to the decision to divorce overnight, usually. Usually the relationship changes over time. And sometimes people come to me and they're not ready to decide if they want a divorce yet, but they want to live separately. They want to have a trial separation, and they want financial boundaries that can be legally enforceable to protect them each during that time period. So, for example, we might be able to work out a temporary support situation, like somebody's going to be paying support. How are they going to manage their finances during this time when they're living separately? What are going to be joint expenses versus separate expenses? And to have the entire conversation of what they're trying to accomplish so they can have that safety net in place while they're giving their relationship time, and they can decide what to do going forward.
Great. Now I have a technical question on that. When they do that, what is the relevance of the date of separation, or is there no date of separation in terms of when the marital pie stops accruing? Can you address that?
Well, I'll go over it with my clients to help them decide if they want to establish a date of separation. And I explain to them that they can use that same date of separation later in a divorce. So we might put that in a temporary separation agreement, that this is the date of separation. This is when our debts will become separate. And really, they've got a lot clearer understanding of their legal rights, their legal obligations while they're in this temporary kind of status of deciding what to do about the future. And what is really nice is that you can have this temporary separation. Nothing's filed in the court. It's all confidential and private. And if you reconcile and you don't need this temporary agreement anymore, it's just gone. You just get rid of it. But if you decide to go forward in divorce, you already have a structure in place for communicating about money. You already maybe have something that'll stay in place and ease into the divorce, and it'll make things a lot simpler. So either way, if you reconcile, it's helpful. And if you decide to get divorced, it's helpful.
Wonderful. Now, do you still do the financial disclosures, disclosing the assets and the debts, the income and expenses? If you're calculating temporary support for child support and or spousal support, I assume you have to do something of that nature.
We do, but it doesn't have to be as formal as the divorce process. I don't need it to be on specific forms. I just want to make sure that both parties have a full understanding and a complete picture of their assets and their obligations at the time that they're separating. And I think you've seen this, I'm sure, over the years. Couples fight about money a lot. And so sometimes just having the conversation about money is something they can't do at the kitchen table. So they can have that with me and have that neutral third party there to help facilitate that conversation. And it's amazing how many things people can agree on after that.
I love this idea, Julie, because certainly I've had people come to me, really, they want I tell them, I'm not going to be a referee for your financial arguments, but I love how you provide a structure. Now, when you're talking about this is a package, around people that may want to physically separate. Now let's talk about couples mediation, which is, I think, what you're alluding to. What is that process like?
So couples mediation is really designed for any couple who is having a type of conflict that is repeated and they cannot seem to find a solution to, usually financial issues. So I can help couples maybe understand each other a little better, where they're coming from, what's important to them. believe it or not, some couples don't communicate very well. And I know we've all seen that. And so sometimes having a third person in the room to help translate what the other person is saying or helping them find common ground can be really, really helpful. It's very different than financial therapy. I mean, couples go to therapists to kind of get to the root causes of whatever conflict they're having. With me, they're not looking at the root causes of the conflict. They're looking at what is the conflict and how do we resolve it? If we're fighting about money, what simple things or complex things can we put in place to resolve the conflict? And I've had this in many different types of situations where divorce was not the desired outcome emotionally or financially. And so they had to find creative ways to stay together and not kill each other over the money disputes.
Well, I see this quite often, and now I have somebody to refer folks to. I mean, how many times has somebody come to me and said, my partner, my spouse, gambles, or they're buying Bitcoin, or they're whatever they're doing. They're either investing in a risky fashion, or they're gambling, or maybe they're spending money on sexual needs outside of the marriage, anything like that. And I love your idea because not to get too technical for people who are watching this, but there's breach of fiduciary duty claims that come up, and you're really helping get at that before it becomes overwhelming, what with this couple's mediation.
Definitely. And I can also educate them about the law, which a therapist cannot do, right? So I can educate them about the law, let them know what potential pitfalls may be down the road if they continue arguing about money and getting a divorce. And you mentioned gambling. One of the cases that I helped with was a couple who were both in their 70s. They did not want to get divorced. He was in very bad health, but he had a gambling problem. And she was worried that he was going to run through both of their money. So we actually established, we put certain assets in his name, in his name that he could gamble with. And that was his fun money. And then we protected a lot of assets in her name that she used for making sure the community was taken care of, making sure she was taken care of because he didn't have a long life expectancy. And so she wanted to make sure she was secure. They did not get divorced. They stayed married. They stayed living together. And he had his slush fund to do the gambling, and she slept at night just fine, knowing that she was going to be protected.
I love this. I mean, we do this all the time in smaller scales in our marriage where people have the money, they're shopping. Somebody likes to shop and somebody wants to make sure. I mean, these can be small issues and they can be large, riskier issues, as you said. So just a few more minutes, let's talk about the post-nuptial agreement. People use that term a lot. Is there any overlap or differences to what we've already discussed in terms of a post-nuptial agreement?
There are. So a post-nuptial agreement, similar to a premarital agreement, it allows couples to contract their financial obligations to each other. And there's a lot of leeway that couples have. And people can, like say, for example, somebody gets an inheritance and they want to preserve certain separate property rights. They don't even know what their separate property rights are. They can come to a mediator like me, find out what this inheritance means legally in their relationship. If they spend it certain ways, is there a right to reimbursement or not? And I can educate them, and then they could come up with a financial, like a post-marital agreement that maybe, in one case that I did, it transmuted the separate property nature of the inheritance to the community. It was something that they wanted to share because they had both taken care of this parent for decades and made major changes in their lives to take care of this parent. And they both were close to this parent, but the parent was not going to leave money to both of them in their estate. So they wanted to treat this as community property. So we did a transmutation agreement.
Wow, I don't see that much. I usually see the opposite, that we're trying to ensure the community doesn't get any of it.
Well, and to your point on that, what would have happened if they did not do this agreement while they were happily married and they got divorced 10 years later? Then they don't have that opportunity to remember what they wanted to do at the time that they were still happy together. And then they find out what the law is 10 years later and they use it as a sword. And this gives them a chance to do things that are positive for their relationship, certain ways. And believe me, education and talking to people and letting them communicate and understand these things, sometimes that's all they need to ramp down the conflict in their relationship. But those
Wonderful.
post-nups can really help, and they make them legally enforceable so that 10 years later, when somebody does something and everybody's mad, they can't go back on it.
Well, the message I want to convey to everyone who's watching is that, when you just think about dissolution of a marriage, aka divorce, or legal separation, please know you don't have to make a decision on any of those. Why not get a consult with Julie Mack, who's here with me now? She can hear what issues you're trying to solve for and figure out the path that is going to meet you and your spouse's needs as a neutral attorney mediator. Julie, anything to add?
No, just that I have sat so many times with my clients who are getting divorced. And if they had seen me 10 years earlier, 5 years earlier, they would not be sitting in my office for that divorce. And that's what I'd like to do.
All right. Well, you heard it from Julie Mack. Her website is juliemackmediation.com. Reach out to her if one of these situations may sound like it could be similar to your situation. Julie, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me on.